YouTube, what's going on? It's just me, Ty, here, bringing you another video. Today's reaction video, we have a video from Ornery. If you do not know who he is, make sure that you click the link in the description. Check out all of his videos, like, comment, and everything to help him out as well. Now, this video right here is what state of Warzone was the best. In my opinion, Warzone 1 is forever going to be the best, but drop down in the comments, let me know, what do you rank each state of Warzone? Now, this video right here, we're going to see what he ranks it. Let's check it out. Make sure you do me a favor, like, comment, share. I'll see you in the next one.
Warzone has now spawned over 5 different games. With those games come new metas, maps, and a lot of change. Some were definitely better than others.
That was the worst thing ever. Just saying.
I'm Ornery, and today we will rank every era of Warzone. I know it's kind of cheap, but I'm going to try and keep things objective as possible through the lens of the community. But I still have my opinions as well. As far as what makes a good era of Warzone, I think it comes down to how fun and playable the game is. Whether it be the gameplay changes made, good and balanced metas, memorable Easter eggs, and sheer amount of content and support for the game, let me know what your favorite era of Warzone is.
That forever will be my favorite. The haunting will forever be the greatest event of all time. Don't care what anyone says, the haunting will forever be the greatest greatest event of all time.
And why? Vanguard may have been one of the most despised Call of Duties, but was surprisingly polarizing when it came to Warzone.
Know about this one.
Myself wasn't the biggest fan. Please just hear me out on this. I'm not asking you to agree with me, but this state of Warzone was far from perfect for a lot of reasons. Start with the launch, where we got Caldera. This is probably dead last when it comes to Warzone maps for most people. On top of being a bad map, we were forced to play it, which eventually would blossom into the absolute trash can playlist that we have today. Also,
and let's not talk about the trash can playlist we have going forward until Black Ops, but let's keep going.
On Caldera, you had the introduction of planes, which was an awful and broken integration that no one was asking for. Once we got settled into the Vanguard era, it was clear to see that all Vanguard guns were leaps and bounds better than any Cold War gun, especially since they all supported 10 attachments. This is where I had my main problem with the Vanguard era, was its metas. Every single gun during this time was a low recoil, high damage beam. On top of this, leveling up Vanguard guns took forever. Was it the Cooper Carbine? If you did have the base game, you were pretty much forced into playing it, which was just
Cooper Carbine.
Anyways,
was crazy.
I know a lot of people's favorite metas were during this time, but I simply could not get behind them. You want to sit here and tell me that the Cooper Carbine people...
I knew it. The Cooper made everyone go crazy. Like that gun was ridiculous. That gun was so ridiculous.
BSH, STG, Bren, and every gun caught in the Vanguard wall of death were balanced. But beyond the metas and being forced to play an awful map, we would have other awful decisions and implementations that would ruin the game. For starters, the infamous sniper nerf. This change was kind of all over the place and really targeted the quick scope meta that was just the Swiss K3 and Kar 98. All it did was give those snipers a one-shot range. Before, they would one-shot at any range, but now they would have to be within, I think, like 25 or 30 meters.
I thought it was 30, but yeah, he's right.
Use these guns as quick scope machines. It did sort of incentivize using guns like the HDR and AX50 since they would still one-shot at any range, so I guess that was cool. But meanwhile, guns like the Ride-Tech and M82 still couldn't, and those were very slow and remained worthless. Anyways, that change would carry over to Warzone 2, but even worse, which we'll talk about here in a second. However, Fortune's Keep is without a doubt a highlight in the whole Vanguard Warzone
That was a good. Fortune's Keep was good.
Rebirth, like I do too, but Fortune's Keep definitely holds its own when it comes to the Resurgence maps.
It does.
For a lot of people, this was the most fun a lot of people were having when it came to Warzone. It's arguably when Rebirth was at its absolute peak. And I'm not saying I didn't have fun during this state, but for me, it personally just didn't hit as hard as the other ones. I can already hear the Warzone mob at my doorstep as I put Warzone 2 over Vanguard Warzone. But once 100%, again, just hear 100%. Me out. No denying this was without a doubt the worst engine that Warzone had ever been played on, which is very important to note. Horrible movement, clunky gunplay, and AI around every corner. It was just bad.
That is so true.
Entire video breaking down Warzone 2's failure. But there are some things that made it redeemable. Start with the maps, which I think all 3 were phenomenal.
No. Ashika Island is the most trash map we'll ever see. Just saying.
Al Mazrah is a great map that gets super underappreciated and somewhat 100%. Hated on, and I think that's only because it exists on Warzone 2. I bet if you think
Al Mazrah, if we would have got Al Mazrah with like a rotation or something, like now, I think it would be so much better. It was a great map, but just a terrible game to be on that map.
This on the rotation with Warzone 3, people would enjoy it. Ashika was controversial and hated on, but I find this to be another great map that is sadly no longer with us. I think if you crank up the brightness and vibrance, you're good to go. Layout is not bad by any means. Then there's Vondel, which is neck and neck with Rebirth Island for a lot of people. Me personally, it's actually my least favorite of the 3 Warzone maps on Warzone 2, but still really good. Anyways, maps aside, let's talk about the big changes going on here, and they're really big. Main one was no one-shot snipers whatsoever.
That was crazy.
Vanguard sniper nerf and raised it to a sniper eradication.
That was crazy.
This definitely went down as one of, if not the worst decision in all of Warzone. Taking a core fundamental aspect to not only COD, but any FPS at that, and just throw it down the drain. They would try and undo this mess by eventually allowing some snipers to one-shot, but only with the explosive ammo, which nuked your velocity to the ground.
You had to have like
impossible to use. Anyways, another change was the looting getting a complete overhaul. At launch, we know the infamous backpack looting system that was horrible, but eventually got simplified into the looting system we have today, which I think is perfect. On a side note, this looting system is rumored to go away once Black Ops 6 integration happens,
which is going to be crazy.
I love being able to stow extra kill streaks, munitions.
And that's the thing. When you don't have to stow like all the smokes, all the kill streaks, it's going to be interesting to see how people are going to play without having that extra stuff. Like, you're going to have to go back to, you know, the very first Warzone to learn how to play like something like that.
Missions boxes, armor boxes, whatever. It makes it feel way more like a battle royale. Regardless of what's happening in the future, this was one of the best changes to Warzone that I didn't even know it needed at the time. We could dig into how bad the gunplay is, since the visual recoil is still being worked on to make the Warzone 2 guns viable in Warzone 3, with still little to no progress in that regard, which is all the evidence you really need to understand how bad it was. And the movement was such a talking point that all I have to say is no slide canceling, no reload canceling, stims don't do anything, and for a minute there you couldn't even sprint while plating.
I forgot about that. You couldn't sprint, like you couldn't sprint or anything like that and play. That was so bad.
With Warzone 2, kick things off with the RPK, which is one of the easiest guns to use and felt really good all around. Just
I think the RPK was meta for like 5 months. It was crazy.
You had to control recoil.
Like, it was so crazy.
AR, which I think is one of the best and most fun ARs in all of Warzone, and I think there's a lot of people who would agree with that. Cronin Squall was potentially one of the most balanced metas we have ever seen as well. And you have the Lockman 5.56, which some people were comparing to the
Cronin was
a game with
crazy
horrible
too.
Gunplay. The metas actually made it a little bit more enjoyable.
Yeah, it's true. That's very true. I can't disagree with that one bit.
Next under the ranking, we have the current era, which is Warzone 3 or Warzone 2.5.
I like it being a 3. I have no problem with this being 3.
You want to call it. Now, I really couldn't tell you what the overall consensus from the community is, but I have been having a lot of fun with Warzone during this state. There are moments where it actually feels like the devs are listening to us and taking responsibility for the horrible decisions from the last 2 years.
That's true.
Back where it once was, gunplay is much better, and we've even gotten small quality of life changes like the removal of overkill. These changes does not bring all sunny skies and rainbows, however. For starters, throughout the entire year, we've only gotten one map, and that's Urzikstan. Now, Urzikstan isn't a bad map by any means, but it definitely is not the best. I already said my piece on Al-Mazrah, but they could at least throw it into the rotation, since they clearly haven't been working on any new maps for us to play. Give us some variety when it comes to Battle Royale. On the other hand, we did get...
Now, let's talk about doing the map rotations. From what I've heard, the engine is so big that like you can't it would take up so much space to do that. I am sad that the big map has not got no love at all. So it's going to be interesting to see. In my opinion, I know we're not going to get any big map love until Verdansk. So it's going to be interesting to see if they put just a little bit in there, because they're putting all the chips in, in Resurgence right now, and then once Black Ops 6 gets there, everyone's just going to be grinding multiplayer and getting their guns. So it's going to be interesting to see.
Rebirth back after a year and a half, so that obviously was a huge win and something that the community desperately wanted. Things like the Car 98 making a return are other signs that deep down inside, Raven does have a heart. There have been a handful of new concepts like ranked Resurgence, which I personally think
Lucky, thank you for the follow.
Ranked Battle Royale. It's given people more gratification to grind Warzone, whereas before there really wasn't. It was more so like, how many kills can you get? Other change is that when something is game breaking, like the snake shots, DG conversion kit, and Renetti, they have been lightning fast to not only fix it, but before fixing them, just remove them from the game entirely. But before it would last for at least a week or two.
But here's the thing. Let's just be all the way honest about things. Is when a gun is OP, when a gun or something is OP, at least let us have fun with it for a little bit, and then you move on. But when we was getting like 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and a gun was OP, that shit got boring. You know, it was bad. So seeing them do what they're doing now, let us have a little bit fun. But I wish I wish the AR meta would be a little bit more open. Which it's about 2, maybe 3 ARs that you can use that are legit. So it hopefully in Black Ops we'll see a lot more. When we had, what was it, the Kilo, the Growl, AMAX, and a couple other guns, man. That meta was so open. Hopefully we'll see that in Black Ops.
Sniping has now evolved from no one-shots to this middle ground where the fast snipers can still one-shot at further ranges while being outgunned by slower and harder to use snipers with infinite range. Apparently Warzone 2 snipers are about to start one-shotting without explosive ammo as well, and I'm really excited to see what that does to sniping. It obviously is trying to undo the damage of Warzone 2, which is difficult, but it has done a great job at that and seems to be getting better with each season. But it also still has its other downsides. The first being that we have a terrible cheating problem that has only gotten worse, especially with MW3 coming to Game Pass. Any ranked game is like a coin flip, as if you're gonna have a cheater in it, which obviously ruins the game for everyone. Their weak spot in Warzone.
Supposedly they fixed it, but it's still rough.
They've become extremely stale and just repetitive. We've had nothing but LMGs that all feel the exact same, just a different gun. As far as ARs, we've only had the Ram 7 until most recently when we got the STG. We saw one of the most broken guns in all of Warzone being the Interceptor as well, which was
I forgot about that.
The HRM
that was crazy.
Most fun and balanced.
I forgot about that gun.
Seen, but that meta just lasted way too long and also ran its course on the community. You can briefly mention the Season 1 Reloaded debacle where people straight up just
that's even worse.
Those that did couldn't use their perks or even access their loadout. Obviously not that big of a deal in the grand scheme of things, but without a doubt the worst update in Warzone history and completely unacceptable. But if we can continue this trend we're on currently with some improvement and diversity in the meta, the Black Ops 6 integration is looking really nice.
It was, and I think I would put this at 3. I would put this status 3 because you can't overlook the Cold War and the very first one. I mean, those two are always going to be goated in my opinion, forever be goated.
Now we're at the second most enjoyable state of Warzone. I want to lead with the fact that for the entirety of Cold War era, Rebirth Island and Verdansk were always playable. Just think about that for a minute. Anyways, I could write a book as to why Rebirth and Verdansk are the 2 best maps in all of Warzone, but that would be beating a dead horse. I mean, it's pretty evident with Warzone 3 that when Rebirth was brought back, it was one of the greatest updates of all time. Verdansk also got its 1984 reskin, which many people like more than the traditional map, but I'll let you guys argue about that in the comments section. Moving forward, probably the one and only thing keeping me from putting this at number 1 was the existence of the DMR meta. Go ahead and say this was one of the worst metas we had ever seen in Warzone and made the game unplayable and unenjoyable. Sniping.
If you was playing back then and you was playing in the DMR meta, the DMR was so nasty. Like you couldn't even walk across the road without getting hit. Like it was the most nastiest gun, hands down, the most broken gun we have ever seen. And like when people say, like, I'm just throwing out the shotguns right now. The shotguns, man, those are worse than the DMR. No, you had to be around the DMR to understand the power of the DMR.
Being mid-range and even close-range engagements were completely ruined. Anyways, that was at the launch of Cold War Zone, but pretty much every meta after that was one people really enjoyed. And this had the FFAR. What else do I need to say? Another really cool feature,
such a goated gun right there,
was that the Modern Warfare guns were still usable and were actually still getting updates to that game.
Such a goated gun. Oh my god.
But a lot of you didn't know that the Psychov was added to Modern Warfare 2019 months after Cold War launch, which is something that we haven't seen since. Then guns like the AMAX were a meta contender for the entirety of Cold War, despite being a Modern Warfare 19 gun.
I'm gonna give props to one person that I watched use the AMAX before anybody. Biffle used to use that AMAX, and he won the Toronto Ultra $100,000 tournament with Nick Merckx and Swag using the AMAX. That was like. And then next thing you know, everyone was trying to do the AMAX.
Compare that to today, where if you load up in Warzone with just about any MW2 gun, you're going to be at a massive disadvantage. Then we had legendary events like the 80s Action Hero event, where we could get massive POIs added to the game that shook up your experience.
Man, you had to drop downtown and go get the specialist.
Didn't make any dramatic changes, which was just for the better. We're still playing on the exact same engine, only now we had a brand new map with Resurgence, which would obviously become a hearsay that the community had fallen in love with and brought in a ton of new players while doing so.
Damn. All right, here we go. The number 1. We all know what number 1 is. We all know.
Come on now, is this really that surprising? Just before we were struck with the pandemic,
I
we were
missed
given one of the
this.
greatest things to use with this newfound free time, that being Warzone. Launch Warzone quickly
Golly.
became a worldwide phenomenon that was everybody's
Damn,
go-to
I
game
missed
for
it.
the
I
majority of
missed
the
this
pandemic.
so
New
much.
Battle Royale inside the COD franchise, there was a lot of hype surrounding it, and it
MP5
delivered.
was
New concept
goated.
being a 1v1 gulag to get back in the fight was a very refreshing take on what people saw as a dead genre at the time. Anyways, we only had Verdansk until Cold War to come along, and people were okay with that. With 150 players,
It really
to keep the pacing
was.
right. Why we haven't had 150 players on our big maps anymore, but
I didn't think
helped
about
out
that.
Verdansk
We
big time. On top of
really
this, we had
was
some
cool with just
fan-favorite
playing
metas.
big map the
Growl,
whole time.
The Kilo, the Bruin, the M13, the MP5, the Car 98, HDR, and several others. On top of
It
this,
was
you also
such
had
a
lot
good
of brokenness
meta.
going on. Snake shots being the first.
God,
of
it was such a
3
good meta
separate
right here.
iterations that were completely overpowered. Infamous FAMAS underbarrel shotgun that might as well acted as a sniper. Thermal scope meta making sniping easier than ever before. AS Val being able to shoot through the entire map while maintaining its damage. These massive bugs, exploits, mistakes, or whatever you want to call them, gave us a very memorable experience and was hitting that Modern Warfare 2 2009 brokenness, which gave that game some charm. On top of this was the most content we've ever gotten in such a small period of time. The keycard bunkers, which were an awesome
bunkers,
addition. Then after
man.
that, it seemed like there was always a new Easter egg to complete that always gave you something to do. Bunker 11 had some zombie Easter egg depth to it.
And then
that made
everyone
you
run
truly
into the
surprised. Hidden
stadium.
Subway was another in-depth Easter egg that I couldn't even imagine being in Warzone today. Zombie Royale, which had become a mainstay in Warzone every Halloween.
That zombie haunting event, season 1 and season 2 will forever be the greatest thing in Call of Duty.
Way more limited time and experimental modes that always gave us something new. Maybe it's nostalgia, but and I'm sure a lot of you will agree that launch Warzone was like catching lightning in a bottle that continued into Cold War for a little bit, but then has been lost since. Hopefully Black Ops 6 can continue to undo the damage of Vanguard and Cold War, but I guess we'll see. Let me know what you guys think. Once again, this is just my opinion, and I tried to keep things objective through the community's eyes, but I would love to know what your all's favorite state of Warzone was, so go ahead and drop your ranking down below. If you want to hear me talk about forgotten metas, the entire history of the Gulag, snipers, or shotguns, go ahead and click here. Like, and thank you so much for watching.